Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are not just talking about a car, we are talking about a rolling argument on wheels, a machine that looks like it lost a bet with reality and decided to double down. Meet the 1958 Sir Vival, a vehicle so strange that even traffic cones probably stepped aside out of respect. In an era when Detroit was flexing chrome and horsepower like politicians flex promises before elections, this thing showed up saying, "What if we didn't die in crashes?" Bold strategy. And before we go any further, hit that subscribe button, because where else are you going to hear about cars that look like they were designed by a genius who maybe skipped a few social gatherings? Trust me, this channel is safer than the Sir Vival itself, emotionally at least. Now, let's rewind to 1958, Worcester, Massachusetts. A man named Walter Jerome looked at post-war America and thought, these cars are getting faster, and people are still treated like optional cargo. Highways were expanding. Engines were getting bigger, and safety, that was like bringing a salad to a barbecue, technically present, but nobody really cared. So Jerome did what every visionary does, ignored trends and built something completely unhinged. Literally, using a 1948 Hudson Commodore as a base, purchased from Bellingham Motors, he spent years developing what would become the only Sir Vival ever made. One unit, that's it, not a limited edition, more like a limited patience situation. Even Timmy once tried to build a second version in his garage, but it ended up as a wine rack and a divorce story. The idea behind Sir Vival was actually brilliant. Jerome separated the car into two sections, a front module with the engine and wheels, and a rear passenger cabin. Between them, a hinge, a hinge, like the car was ready to politely bow before impact. The logic was simple but revolutionary. In a crash, the front section could deflect energy instead of sending the engine straight into the passengers. Bob saw that hinge and immediately whispered that it was government testing flexible reality. And then there's the driver's seat, placed in a raised central turret, about 3 feet, 91 centimeters above the passenger area. Imagine sitting there like a submarine captain, surrounded by curved glass, roughly 1 foot 30 centimeters high and about 4 feet 122 centimeters in circumference. Visibility fantastic, style debatable, dignity depends on how confident you are. Technically, Sir Vival borrowed heavily from its Hudson roots. Under the hood sat an L-head inline-six engine, around 262 cubic inches, or 4 liters, producing about 121 horsepower, roughly 90 kilowatts. Not exactly a rocket, but enough to keep up with traffic, or at least confuse it. The drivetrain remained front-engine, rear-wheel drive, but the body layout turned everything into a philosophical debate. Where Jerome didn't reinvent things, he relied on Hudson's existing suspension, brakes, and wheel setup. But the real innovation wasn't mechanical. It was conceptual: seat belts, padded interiors, side marker lights, sliding doors, rubber bumpers, features that sounded weird back then but are now as normal as Bob complaining about electricity bills. And honestly, that's what makes Sir Vival fascinating. It wasn't built to impress, it was built to protect. While others chased speed and style, Jerome asked the uncomfortable question, what if cars cared about people more than appearance? Timmy calls that thinking ahead, which is ironic coming from a guy who once installed brakes after testing top speed. Design-wise, Sir Vival looked like it escaped from a laboratory where engineers and philosophers argued too long and nobody invited a designer. The split body wasn't just engineering, it was a statement. The front section practically shouted, "Keep the dangerous stuff away from humans," while the rear cabin quietly replied, "Finally someone said it." The turret placed the driver above everything, like a king surveying his kingdom, or like Bob on his balcony scanning for satellites he's convinced are watching him personally. Nothing about this car was accidental. The rubber bumpers hinted that even small impacts should not ruin your day or your wallet. The sliding doors suggested practicality over drama. The padded interior whispered a future where cars might actually care if you hit something. Revolutionary, considering most vehicles back then treated safety like an optional personality trait. Jerome wasn't chasing beauty, he was chasing survival, and in a world obsessed with tail fins and shine, that made survival the awkward genius at the party. Nobody understood. Now, let's talk about the market, or rather, the complete lack of one. Late -1950s buyers wanted long, low, shiny machines that made neighbors jealous and teenagers irresponsible. Survival delivered attention, sure, but more in the should we call someone category. Compared to standard sedans of the time, it sacrificed style for purpose. Compared to later safety concept cars, it looked rough, almost homemade. But pioneers rarely arrive polished, they arrive correct. Timmy once said he'd totally daily drive a Survival because you can see everything from up there, which is the same logic he used when climbing onto his roof to fix an antenna that wasn't broken. Meanwhile, Bob insisted the turret was clearly designed for alien docking procedures, and honestly, at 22 o'clock in the morning, that explanation feels just as convincing as anything else. What makes Survival important is not how it looked, but what it asked. It challenged an entire industry to rethink priorities. Today, we take crash safety, energy absorption, and visibility seriously. But back then, Jerome sounded like the only sober guy at a party full of speed enthusiasts and dreamers. And like many visionaries, he didn't get mass production. He got recognition. Eventually, before we talk money, we have to give this machine the respect it deserves. Survival is not just a car, it's a conversation on wheels, a brave attempt to protect people before impressing them. It may look unusual, but so do most great ideas at the beginning. This thing had courage, more than most vehicles, and definitely more than Timmy after his third drink explaining aerodynamics to a ceiling fan. As for price, Survival was never commercially sold, so it didn't carry a traditional showroom tag. It remains a one-of-one experimental vehicle, making its value more historical than transactional. No confirmed auction sales exist through major houses like Barrett-Jackson or R.M. Sotheby's, and its worth today would depend entirely on collectors who appreciate bold engineering over conventional beauty. In simple terms, priceless, or at least expensive enough to make Bob unplug his fridge to save money. And finally, a huge thank you to all the sponsors of this channel. Yes, you legends who hit that membership button and keep this madness rolling. Without you, I'd probably be explaining cars to Timmy in a garage while Bob installs aluminum foil on my roof. For protection, take care of yourselves, drive safe, and remember, if your car looks weird but saves your life, it's not ugly, it's just ahead of its time.